From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Another episode of the Wildcast podcast coming your way to start the week. Justin Spears here with Michael Lev. Now, I'm not here to gloat, but I was the only one who picked Arizona to beat San Diego State in last week's pick.
You should gloat. I would gloat.
Now, I said 24-20. I didn't think it was going to be 38-20. So not only did Arizona win, but they won very convincingly. And it was a very just sound win altogether for Arizona. Was it perfect? No. There were definitely a couple of debacles, definitely a couple of lapses for the Wildcats, but they were able to put together next play. That kind of mindset. Jedd Fisch emphasized that in his Monday press conference, is that the players really bought into what these coaches are selling the players, and they always had this next play mentality. They didn't allow any sort of, like I said, lapses to allow them to kind of get down, because we've seen in the past, over the last few years, an Arizona team, things could go well, and then there's that one thing that just starts the avalanche. Last year, they are up 13-0, and then a pick six starts an avalanche, and they lose to NAU. So many times this program has had just little things kind of get in the way of winning football games, but you didn't see that. Against San Diego State, Jayden de Laura, we're going to talk about his performance and Jacob Cowing's performance here in just a little bit because they were outstanding. But even though Jayden de Laura threw an interception, the Wildcats were able to kind of bounce back and hold off San Diego State. So I was impressed with the win. Lev, you actually rewatched the game. You put together your 5 takeaways. That's on Tucson.com and the Wildcast app. What was your ultimate takeaways after watching the game?
Yeah, I think number one on the list was just how Jayden de Laura played. And, you don't see as much when you're watching live as you do when you rewatch the game like I do and kind of go over every play, watch the line play. Specifically, we were also kind of in the corner, almost in the end zone, so it wasn't as easy to see some of the stuff. But pass blocking struggled at times in this game, gave up a decent amount of pressures. Jayden de Laura was completely unfazed. Not only was he unfazed, but he seemed to know exactly where to go with the ball, exactly when to release it, like what all of his outlets were. It was a masterclass in handling a pass rush, making your offensive line look good. The two things work in concert. There were several references last year by Jedd Fisch and others, that like, hey, yeah, we gave up a league high 35 sacks, but like some of that's on the quarterback. Sometimes the quarterback needs to get rid of the ball. And PFF, Pro Football Focus, has this stat, percentage of pressures that are turned into sacks. And it's basically like a reflection on the quarterback. How many of these plays are they allowing to become sacks, and how many of them are they, turning into non-sacks?
Yeah.
And his percentage was 5.3% or 5.6%. 1 out of 18 pressures only turned into a sack, and that one was one where he could have gotten rid of the ball, but he decided to just go down and let time run off the clock there in the fourth quarter. There was only one quarterback performance last season by an Arizona player that was less than 10%, and that was the Jordan McLeod game at Oregon. If you're wondering, like, why was Jordan McLeod, why was the offense moving the ball so much better when Jordan McLeod was quarterbacking in that game? It might have been sack avoidance, getting the ball out of your hands in a timely manner. And I was really impressed with how Jayden de Laura was able to do that.
So let's kind of recap everything that happened on Saturday here. And we are going to get into the Monday mailbags. That's going to be a thing every single week. If you have any questions or comments on the game, we're going to talk about them on the Wildcast podcast. So appreciate all of those who submitted questions. We will be answering those towards the latter part of the podcast. But, Lev, it was season opener, year 2 of the Jedd Fisch era. It's finally our chance to see all of the newcomers finally come together and play for Arizona. And it was a hot game. It was very, very hot. The announced temperature at kickoff was 100 degrees, which for San Diego State is a record, both home or away. So it was definitely not the norm for San Diego. But for Arizona, they were like, well, we embraced it. All summer long, we were working out at noon at the stadium, pulling sleds in the hot desert heat. So for Arizona, they kind of felt a little bit at home. But I was very surprised with how just Jaden DeLora and Jacob Cowing were able to just come out and just make splash plays and already establish a chemistry that maybe you would see in games 3 or games 4. But game 1, right off the bat, I mean, neither of these guys were a part of the program last year. They've only been in the system for less than a year. And for Jaden, it's probably a little bit more difficult because he had to take snaps under center. He had to get used to a pro-style offense. But you saw against San Diego State, he was thriving. He was putting, his passes all in the right place. I mean, that rope that he threw to T-Mac in the end zone, I mean, that was in such an incredible spot. I mean, it was amazing to see those two guys, especially Jaden DeLora and Jacob Cowing, just get that connection right off the bat.
What's funny is I think maybe the second target for Cowing, they had kind of a miscommunication. There was they were inside the red zone, kind of a drop zone by San Diego State, and Jacob sat down in front of it, and Jaden was trying to lead him, and they obviously got on the right page after that. I think he had 10 targets and caught 8 passes. That's 80%. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
I would say for sure. Jaden wasn't greedy in this game either. I think the pick is probably the one example of a ball that he kind of forced a little bit. And it was kind of weird. He stepped up in the pocket, and there were a couple of Arizona blockers who had nobody to block because the pass rush had kind of gone behind them. He couldn't plant his feet because of those bodies. Probably would have been better off running in that situation. He didn't run once in the entire game. What I'm going to be interested to see with Jacob Cowing is, our team's going to defend him differently. We all knew that he was good, but you know what? That was Conference USA good, right?
Yeah.
Now he's like Pac-12 good.
No.
This is Power 5 good. I know it was against a Group of 5 opponent, but a very good defense. There were tons of NFL scouts at that game. Watching him, Gary Danielson was saying this is an NFL player during the broadcast. So is he going to see double teams now on the regular? Is he going to always see like the other team's best corner? And if that's the case, how is Jedd Fisch going to get him open? Or are we just going to see other guys get the ball a little bit more? We're going to see more T-Mac.
Yeah.
T-Mac had 8 targets in that game. Only 3 were caught. Some of those were kind of what I would call kind of like semi-throwaways by Jaden. There was never really a legitimate chance for T-Mac to catch the ball. But, man, the few times he did, very impressive.
Like that one catch where he had to turn around and almost adjust his body like almost a whole 5 or 6 yards.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was.
And they call it PI on San Diego State.
He got grabbed. His jersey got grabbed. Jaden was kind of rolling to his left, and it was very hot, as you mentioned. I'm sure it seemed like the ball slipped out of his hands a little bit. So it's kind of an arm punt. To Rowan McMillan, he just came back for the ball, scooped it up off the ground like it was nothing. I kind of gave up on the play watching it from our angle, like, oh, he's not catching that.
Yeah.
No way. And then he did.
Yeah.
They reviewed it, and it was a net of 22 yards, the difference between the gain and what they would have gotten for the PI. Great play. Showed his toughness on the touchdown. I mean, he got absolutely drilled. I don't know if it was the rib cage or the shoulder or whatever. Like, he was kind of struggling coming back to the sideline, probably out of breath or something like that. But
first touchdown catch his first reception.
First touchdown catch. I mean, he's clearly... He's got it. He's a stud. Running game was really good against a really tough run defense. I liked how they rotated backs. I'm going to be writing about that later today, just how they did it, how many guys they used, the pattern, different. It was different,
Yeah.
As Jed said, it wasn't like we didn't want to have 3 guys waiting on the sideline, waiting for the guy who's in there to get tired. It was constantly rotating in fresh bodies, and that had an impact as the game went along.
Now, Michael Wiley, he's viewed as the starter because he's been here for now, 4 years now? So he's the veteran of this group. But DJ Williams is also a veteran, but he might be the best running back of the group right now. Because the way he looked at the end of the game, you referred to him as the closer, Lev. Like when you thought, okay, Jaden DeLora, Jacob Cowing, all these guys, Arizona's moving the ball down the field, and right there at the end of the game, you just hand the ball off to DJ Williams, and he was just, I mean, it felt like he was getting an easy 4 or 5 yards every single carry. So they definitely have an interesting dynamic at running back. But to talk about some very important stats here, Jaden DeLora was 22 for 35, 299 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And Lev, his 4 touchdowns is already more than most of Arizona's quarterbacks from a season ago. I was looking at season total for passing touchdowns. Will Plummer had 6 last year, and everybody else had 2. Jaden DeLora, in just the first half, had more passing touchdowns than Gunnar Cruz and Jordan McLeod and all those other guys. So the reason why they wanted to get Jaden DeLora, he can perform well on a Power 5 level, and he showed that on Saturday. And, Arizona, they needed a very competent quarterback. And I say this with all due respect to Will Plummer and Gunnar Cruz, because those guys are awesome. But with what Jed Fish wants, if this team wants to get to where it wants to go, they needed a very competent quarterback. And so far with Jaden DeLora, we're starting to see a leader out of him.
Yeah, it's true. I think that a lot of those, they had only so many of whatever last year stats are going to just be blown away by this offense. It wouldn't surprise me at all if by the end of the game Saturday night against Mississippi State, if Jaden hasn't already surpassed the touchdown total that Will Plummer put up last year. Probably going to be more of a shootout type of game against Mississippi State. A lot of footballs flying through the air in that one. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, great debut for Johnny Nansen. I mean, they gave up 20 points, but 7 were on the quote unquote blocked punt, which wasn't really a blocked punt. It was just a misplay, a malfunction, a mishap.
Jed said that Josh Donovan should have been up more.
Yeah, it was
because
just
it was
too far back.
In the end zone.
Yeah, too far back. They gave up really 2 field goals on legit drives by the offense because the touchdown came after the fumble by Dorian Singer. So that's pretty darn good. I mean, yeah. I know, San Diego State kind of limited offensively, not a real threatening team as far as a lot of speedy pass catchers, and Braxton Burmeister was kind of banged up during that game. His shoulder was bothering him there in the third quarter, and they ended up taking him out. But you couldn't ask for much more from the defense. Totally different test coming up against Mississippi State. We'll talk about that later in the week on our Thursday podcast. But I was really impressed with what I saw, and that came without Hunter Echols playing for pretty much the entire second half.
Yeah,
because of a shoulder or elbow or something with his right arm was bothering him. We'll see if he's available this week. Christian Roland Wallace looked really good. Christian Young looked kind of like an NFL player. I mean, he's just got that size-speed combo that's pretty rare. I continue to be worried about depth at certain positions on defense, linebacker, safety.
Yeah.
But hey, if you can keep guys healthy, keep guys fresh, kind of deliver more of the same, couple takeaways, it's a nice formula for success.
Well, I had a kind of a checklist when looking at the defense and how they performed, and think about the things that they focused on in the offseason. It was takeaways, red zone defense, and also getting to the quarterback. And right off the bat, very first play of the game, Hunter Echols gets a sack. Okay, boom, you can check that off. And then after Jaden DeLora throws an interception, and I thought, man, San Diego State, they got a lot of momentum. They just blocked a punt. Jaden DeLora throws an interception. It does not look good for the Cats. And what happens? Jackson Turner gets his first interception as an Arizona Wildcat. And it was kind of he didn't just straight up just grab it. It was kind of like a tip drill a little bit, and it just landed right in his arms. But Arizona got momentum back right away. And then later on in the game, they got another takeaway by doing a forced fumble. Was that inside the red zone technically when they forced the fumble? So, bam, red zone defense right there. They were able to force a takeaway right when San Diego State was driving and could have made the game interesting. But that right there pretty much ended the game for Arizona. So for Johnny Nansen in his first ever game calling a defense as like the guy, I thought he was outstanding. And I thought all of the new guys that Arizona was able to bring in they were also great as well. So again, was it perfect for Arizona? I mean, we talked about the malfunction on special teams with the punt, a couple lapses on defense, some things happen on offense like the Jaden DeLoria interception, but altogether, I thought Arizona, for a season opener, I'll give them a B+ or maybe an A-.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. There are always things you need to clean up. There were a couple special teams mistakes. Like I said, the pass blocking was not great. Jaden DeLoria helped make the offensive line look good. And now, hey, there's film, right?
Yeah.
There's film of Johnny Nansen's defense. There's
and the Pirates.
There's film of Jaden DeLoria in this offense and Jacob Cowling in this offense. So we'll see. Mississippi State, and that's an SEC club, and a pretty good one. If you go above 500 in that division that they play in, they were 7-6, 4-4 last year, playing one of the toughest schedules in the country. That's going to be a tough opponent.
Yeah, and they just beat Memphis too.
Killed them.
Yeah. And Mike Leach is sitting somewhere on his pirate ship just watching film, and he's going to have a game plan for Arizona. So we'll see how they do in the season opener, or the home opener, I should say. All right, so we're going to talk more Arizona, Mississippi State later on in the week when our boss, sports editor, Ryan Finley, comes by, and he'll provide us his Pac-12 picks of the week. How did he do this week? I
don't know. I think I was 2-3 against the spread. I feel like, which is not great, but I've been worse. So,
well, one of our day one listeners, John Vader, and he actually tagged us on Twitter talking about how I should be gloating on this podcast come Monday. But he was one of our mailbag questions, and I think this is a perfect segue into our mailbag questions. So appreciate all of you for your submissions. Thank you once again. We're going to do this every week, so whatever you can think of, let us know on Twitter at the Wildcaster, or let me know at Justin E Sports, or Lev know at Michael J. Lev. All right, so John Vader, his first question is Arizona averaged just over 4.6 yards rushing per carry versus San Diego State. What does Arizona need to average versus Mississippi State to win?
Yeah, I think.
Good question.
Yeah, somewhere around that range, over 4 yards per carry. I mean, you have to, when you look at college rushing statistics, you have to take the sacks out of the mix. They do that in the NFL. They don't do that in college, so you have to, take that out. But I'd say if they're over 4 yards a carry, that would be really helpful. Mississippi State had the ball for over 40 minutes against Memphis.
Wow.
Last week. That's just not going to cut it. You can't, you got to sustain drives and keep their offense on the sideline. So I'd say if they can be over 4 yards per carry by the running backs, that should get the job done.
3.5 yards in a cloud of dust. That's all you need. So, 3.5, 4 yards. If they can stay in that mark and above, definitely good for them.
And a cloud of cork particles.
Yeah, right. All right, let's go to his other question, because he's got a 3-part question. His other one is, the linebacker was a question. Rate that position after one game. I'd say pretty solid. Jerry Roberts, he had a season-ending leg injury last year, and he played every defensive, or for the most part, he played every.
Except for the last
couple drives. But for the ones where they wanted the starters in, he played every single snap. So for him to go out there, play as many snaps as he did, lead the team in tackles, I thought he was outstanding. Altogether, though, pretty solid for Arizona's linebacking core. But we need to see it against some other opponents. We can't just kind of really go off one game.
Yeah, again, this is going to be a different game. Those guys are going to have to play in space. They're going to have to cover, whether it's man against a running back or a slot receiver, zone, whatever the case might be. Not as much sort of downhill linebacking play. I thought that Colby Cage acquitted himself pretty well. I still think he needs to get a little bit bigger and more physical. But he made an open field tackle on Braxton Burmeister in the first quarter. It was kind of a big play. Recovered the fumble that Parashan forced. Did have an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty earlier in that sequence. But hey, you know what? You get emotions run high. There's a lot of adrenaline going through those players. It happened when the backup quarterback. I think it was the backup quarterback, Will Haskell, scrambled and his helmet came off, and Colby kind of gave him a shove. Once his helmet was off, the play's supposed to stop right there. Not a huge deal. I'm interested to see his progress and how he does in this upcoming game, because that's what Colby's specialty is supposed to be. He was kind of a more of a safety in high school, should be effective as a space player.
Well, and that kind of goes along the lines with John Vader's third question. How do you pressure air raid offense? Well, pressure getting to the quarterback, of course, you're going to hope that Hunter Echols is available for Saturday so he can get to the quarterback. But you're going to need to use those kind of safety linebacker players to avoid yards after catch things from happening, because that's one thing about Mississippi State, according to former U of A football SID Blair Willis. He tweeted this earlier on Monday, that one thing about Mississippi State is that I think they have like almost 200 yards of yak yards after catch. It was like some crazy stat where they as soon as they catch the ball, they're moving and they're getting a lot of yak.
PFF has it at 257 out of 442.
That's ridiculous. So you need, and Arizona, they've struggled the last couple of years in open field tackling. Against San Diego State, like you said, Colby Cage was getting out in the open field, making some tackles. Same with Christian Young. So I think Colby Cage, Christian Young, Jackson Turner, those guys are going to need to play all-time games on Saturday.
They really are, because always with this type of offense, those slot receivers play a huge role. Yeah. And you can only put so many cornerbacks on the field. Hopefully Traden Stukes will be back and available. He was warming up this last week, did not play in the game. I think that's a wise course of action for his long-term health. I mean, not really facing a passing team. Isaiah Rutherford did fine on the other side. So looking at PFF's breakdown of Will Rogers from this past week, they had him under pressure on only 8 of 52 dropbacks, 3 for 6, 50%, 29 yards. When kept clean, 35 for 43, 81.4%, 422 yards, 5 touchdowns. So obviously no quarterback likes to have pressure. How do you do it? Well, I think you have to mix it up. Yeah. You ideally will get pressure with 4 up front, and so you can drop 7. I know that in the past, Arizona has tried to defend a Mike Leach offenses, rushing 3 and dropping 8. That did not go very well. Hopefully we won't see much of that in this particular game, but give them different looks, and if you get a chance, hit them. You have to hit the quarterback. Let him know that you're there. He's got to. I know there's no quote unquote dirt when you've got a turf field, but you got to make his jersey a little bit dirty.
Yeah, got to add some cork to the jersey. But, Mike Leach, he's traditionally done well at Arizona Stadium. The Wildcats have struggled against Mike Leach coached teams, especially when he was at Washington State. I never forget Luke Falk just torching Arizona. I think it was the 2016 or 2015 season. So yeah, they're gonna have athletes, Mississippi State, and they're gonna be getting out into the open field. This is not San Diego State. I think this is a bigger challenge than the Aztecs. But fortunately, night game, Tucson, in your own stadium. So fortunately, Arizona has a little bit of home field advantage, because I think now that they beat San Diego State and did so convincingly, and a lot of people are, they were already excited about this team. I think Arizona's probably going to draw at least 42,000 on Saturday. But we'll talk more about that on Thursday. Let's go back to some more questions. Anthony Abeda, he asked, how does it feel to have these guys bought into winning after 2 hard seasons? And that's the thing, man, is the COVID year was very hard on these players for a variety of reasons that we can, discuss in a whole nother podcast. But, 2021, coaching staff comes and, with all due respect to the players from last year, the cupboards were empty. They're not as full as they are in 2022. And, so many of the veteran players who originally signed up to play for Kevin Sumlin, they just were kind of accustomed to losing, and they just would lose. And Jed Fish and his staff, they did a really good job of coming in here and saying, if we're going to become champions, we need to behave like champions. We need to make this a mindset. We need to get out of this losing state of mind. And you've really seen the culture change just from that standpoint. And the players have a little bit more confidence in themselves. So I think for the players, for them to experience something like that on Saturday, to not only win, but just come out and just be the more dominant team. And I said this on Twitter over the weekend. This isn't like the Cal win, where the Bears had a number of players out for COVID, and it wasn't a fully loaded Cal team. And then when you look at the win, you're like, yeah, it's cool that they broke the losing streak, but you can't really put an asterisk on the San Diego State win like you did with the Cal win. But regardless, I'm happy for the guys that they were able to experience something like that on Saturday.
Yeah, Jed said after the game that we asked them to have confidence without evidence. He kept stressing, trust the process, keep building, keep working. At some point, you need to see something, right? You need to see some tangible results. And I think that's the greatest value of this first game, is they got to see their hard work pay off.
The fruits of their labor.
Yeah, the fruits of their labor. So they should have a lot of confidence going into week 2. Obviously, they upgraded the talent at numerous positions. And recruiting is a big, big, big deal in college football. It's probably 75% of the game. But the mental part of it, the psychological part of it, also a big deal, especially when, there's been such a losing culture around here. Getting that out of your system.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to do it. And again, I think that's the value in winning that first game. Not, how many times have we come out of week 1? Oh, it was a close loss. They had a close loss against USC in 2020. They had a close loss against BYU last year. They had a close loss against Hawaii. They had a close loss against BYU the previous year. It's not the same, and as Jed said, I think after the game, it's a lot more satisfying to coach off of a win than a loss.
Luis Molina asked, the O-line was great. How do you think they will hold up against Mississippi State? It's going to be tough, man, especially because they're a little bit banged up already after week 1. Jonas Savaiinea was banged up. Peyton Fears got a little bit banged up too. Sam Longy, the JUCO transfer from a couple of years ago, he's kind of like the unsung hero of this San Diego State game. He was playing both guard and tackle. So it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic for the O-line this upcoming week and the availability for all the guys. I'm thinking everyone will be available, but again, I'm not a doctor. I can't really predict anything. But I thought O-line, they were awesome. I mean, because going into this game against San Diego State, they were the big question mark. Like, this is a great roster that they have. This team can win some games, but it all falls on the O-line. And on Saturday, they showed that Arizona can definitely win 5 or 6 games if the O-line plays like that.
Yeah, again, huge matchup coming up in this game. I'm worried about the pass protection. A lot of breakdowns. As I said, PFF had 18 pressures. That's like almost 50%.
Yeah.
Right at 50% based on dropbacks. And Jayden de Laura bailed them out a bunch of times. That's not a sustainable formula.
Yeah.
Especially if, what happens if those outlet receivers are covered? Then what? Then you're talking sacks and you're putting your quarterback at risk. So definitely some stuff that they need to clean up in regard to the pass protection. The run blocking I thought was pretty darn good. The running backs did make a lot of yards after contact, but it was minimally, and Gary Danielson pointed this out, like a draw, against the San Diego State front. And that was kind of good enough. They got their butts kicked in last year's game against them. And to get to the point of it being basically a stalemate, you can see if you're just kind of good enough up front when you have a better quarterback and some really good skill players on the outside, you can move the football that way.
Skylar Bain Connor asked, it's personal was an embodiment of how the team performed on the field. After a week 1 win, does the team feel relaxed, or are they going to come back with the same grit against MSU? I mean, shoot, they were back to practice already on Sunday. They moved on to San Diego State. They won on Saturday, and then in less than 24 hours, they had already turned the page and were practicing for the next week. So I don't know how they're going to come out. We'll find out on Saturday, but I'm thinking these coaches are going to have these guys ready. They know that, hey, yeah, it's great that Arizona got a win, but let's try to do this, put together a winning streak, not just enjoy one game.
Yeah, a lot of talk about it. We just went 1-0 in week 1. Let's go 1-0 in week 2.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it at all. Honestly, you're going to be fired up for the home opener. You're going to be fired up for facing an SEC opponent. They should be hungry, if anything, to prove themselves even further than they already have. So I do not foresee any kind of a letdown whatsoever. I could maybe, if they were to win this game, I could maybe see it a little bit for the following week against North Dakota State, FCS team, kind of sandwiched in between the SEC and the opening of Pac-12 play. But that's for down the road. I think they'll be in a very good frame of mind for this game.
AZ Cat John asks, which position group was the most improved by its play, and which group surprised you the most? Improved?
Most improved, I would say a quarterback.
Yeah.
or wide receiver, right? I mean, just a night and day difference from last year. The group that surprised me the most.
I'd say safeties, honestly.
Well, in the sense that those guys were kind of playing different positions, and as we kind of observed, during spring and training camp practices, they look more comfortable in the positions that they're in now. Those guys, especially Jackson Turner, Jaden Young, Gunnar Maldonado, they were asked a lot last year to cover slot receivers, man coverage without a lot of help over the top. And that really put them in a vulnerable position.
Yeah.
Feels like Jackson Turner is a lot more comfortable having everything in front of him, kind of playing that center field role coming up. He had a couple nice, really solid hits on people without getting penalized, which is a good sign. Also, those guys look comfortable back there for sure.
DW Lee 200 asks, are Kean Burnett and Jason Harris hurt? Surprised to see Tanner McLaughlin and Sterling Deuce Lane get playing time over them.
Kean Burnett is definitely not hurt. He played in the game as the third tight end. I think that is really a product of they like Tanner McLaughlin.
Yeah.
He's an interesting player. He's from Canada. He went to Southern Utah. I think he was initially, early in his career, a wide receiver, so he's kind of grown into a tight end. Has had a knee injury within the last couple of years. He wears a brace out there, but I was really impressed with what I saw from him, especially in the blocking game. And look, you're going to need more than 2 tight ends over the course of the season. There's no reason to force Kean Burnett out there. If you got a couple of veterans ahead of him, you can kind of ease him in, let him learn, and let him grow. As far as Jason Harris, I think he doesn't play the same position that Sterling Lane plays. Sterling Lane is playing the cat position. Jason Harris is playing the defensive end spot. When Jalen Harris came out of the game, it was Jeremy Mercer who went in over there. And they needed 3 cats because Hunter Echols got hurt.
Yeah.
Sterling Lane was the third guy. He flashed. I mean, he got in the backfield twice out of his 8 or so snaps that he had. He's really fast. Didn't have the benefit of spring practice. Definitely needs an off season in the weight room. But I liked what I saw from him out there.
There's a reason why he was one of their highest rated commits. So he chose Arizona over Michigan, Oregon, LSU. I mean, he could have went to a lot of high profile programs. So he's definitely the goods, and he's going to have a bright future. All right, Irish Mike 62. How much bigger is Mississippi State compared to SDSU? Much bigger.
That's a good question. I haven't sat down and examined the roster, but my guess is that their linemen are bigger, especially their defensive linemen. San Diego State's best defensive lineman, Jonah Tavai, really, really good player. He's like 6 feet, 290. You're going to get bigger dudes against Mississippi State. It's just, you're playing a legit SEC school. Maybe not what they're known for under Mike Leach, but that's the caliber of athlete, the size of athlete that you're going to face. That's one of the challenges coming up, bigger and better athletes.
All right, let's quickly go through these last few. Dirk_Guns asks, will they continue to rotate running backs in a committee as the season progresses? I was a little surprised to see Michael Wiley only get 6 touches. I think so.
Yeah, they're going to. And I think he had more touches than that. He only had 6 carries, but he had 3 receptions.
Okay. And
I think he'll lead the running back core. It was 9 total touches. So, DJ Williams had 15. Jonah Coleman had 13. Michael Wiley had 9. I think you'll continue to see something like that. It also depends on the game. Like if you're playing from behind, you might need Michael Wiley more because he's so good as a receiver. And I don't really think that that's necessarily DJ Williams' forte. And I think why not stick with what works?
Yeah.
They were shuttling the guys in and out, almost shifting like hockey lines, and it was effective.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to keep all those guys engaged too.
And also injuries happen.
Oh,
so one of those guys is probably going to go down. You can throw in a Stevie Rocker or a Drake Anderson who's got some experience. So Arizona's pretty good at running back right now. All right, Steven520AZ asks, where was Jamari Joyner? I could have sworn I saw him on the field playing some special teams.
No, that was Anthony Solomon.
Oh, okay. That was another
same number 10.
Okay.
Yeah, Jamari didn't play. He's running behind some of the other guys at wide receiver right now. They didn't play a ton of wide receivers in the game. The backups didn't get a lot of snaps. I'm sure that will change over the course of the season. You guys will get tired. Guys will get banged up. Jamari, he had a difficult rehab. Second foot surgery. Couldn't run, I'm sure, very much. While coming back from that, he's a little bit overweight in training camp. It looks like that he's dropped that weight since then. Like he looks really fit right now, but he's going to have to put in some work to get in the rotation. I do think there will be a moment this year where Jamari does something meaningful, whether that's like a trick play, running out of the Wildcat, something. We're going to see Jamari before all said and done.
All right, last one here, and a listener kind of answered it. Brian Parker asks, how do we get T-Mac more involved? And then Skylar Bain Connor answers, he caught a touchdown in his first game as a college athlete. That's better than most, which is very true.
Yeah, like I said, he had 8 targets in the game. That's a high total, and I'm not worried about that at all. If he had put up a 3 for 53 and a touchdown every week, that would add up to a pretty good season for a freshman.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, I'll be interested to see how teams start covering Jacob Cowing. If they start getting more attention, more safety help, whatever, that's just going to free up T-Mac. It's going to free up Dorian Singer. It's going to free up Alex Lyons or Tanner McLachlan or Kean Burnett, who's ever at tight end. So that'll be kind of the chess match that takes place over the course of the season. I don't think T-Mac's going to get the volume that Jacob Cowing will, but he'll make a lot of big impact plays.
And T-Mac technically didn't start, right?
Yeah, that was weird. We probably should have asked Jet. We should have asked Jet about that. I don't know. I don't know if T-Mac had to go to the bathroom or his shoe was untied or something. But AJ Jones played the first snap, and then T-Mac came in.
All right, well, appreciate all of you for submitting questions for us. We're going to do this every week, so make sure you pay attention to our social media accounts when we put out those posts. And if you want to, and we highly recommend it because we're right in the middle of football season, go to Tucson.com, subscribe to us online, and if you want to follow all of our live coverage on the Wildcats throughout the week, download the Wildcaster app for free off the App Store and Google Play. And for the Wildcast podcast, subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.